it's Marianne from Yarnworx Studio, and today we're going to be making this, which is called my winter bow tie headband. And it is a really fun pattern. It takes me a little under 2 hours to make from start to finish. It is a knit pattern, and I'll show you all the steps I take in this video. So make sure you go to my website, yarnworxstudio.com. That's Yarnworx with an X. And get the full written pattern so you can follow along, but I'll go through all the steps in the video as well so you can enjoy this tutorial. Just to talk about it for a minute, here it is on my head. You can kind of see there's a texture, and what we use is mock cables. I've used a worsted weight yarn. It gives you this little bow tie effect kind of in the middle at the front, which gives it a nice detail but leaves it nice and thick along the sides so that it can cover your ears easily, nice and warmly. So I'm going to pull it off, and I'm not a hair model by any means, so my hair is going to get all crazy. But here it is. We'll talk about the construction a little bit. So the way that it's done is it's knit flat, and then you join it in the middle, you seam it, and then you knit a little section that wraps around the pattern and cinches it together, and that's what makes the bow tie effect. So it's really simple knit. The knit is straight like this. Quickly tell you the materials that I used to make this beautiful piece. You can see it's a little bit stretchy, but not too stretchy, because if it's too stretchy, it's gonna feel like it's gonna pop right off, or it's too loose. If it's too tight, it might feel like it's gonna pop off the top just from cinching. So I used a worsted weight, so I'll show you the yarn first. I used, you guessed it, my yarn scraps. So especially it's 2020 right now, COVID, I'm using a lot of scraps for a lot of different projects and tutorials. So this is actually a Bernat Super Value, which is a great acrylic yarn if you want to just have it around for making really anything. I use it for all sorts of things. They've discontinued this color. I believe it was one of their heathers maybe, and I think it might have been called Plum Mist. But they definitely don't have this color available on their website right now. But I do link in the written pattern a couple other yarn options, as well as other colors of Bernat Super Value that I love. But the nice thing about this is you can make it in any color, and it's gonna look awesome, whether you want it to pop out or kind of blend in with your hair. I just really love purples right now. But any worsted weight will do. Acrylic is fine. You can use like something fancier. You can get, maybe some more wool-based stuff to make it warmer. I run really hot, and I live in Canada. So when I put on headbands, I don't want them to be too heavy, or I'm gonna need to take them off before I'm finished my walk or whatever I'm doing. So that's the yarn. I also used 6.5 millimeter knitting needles. You can use any type of needle. I chose to use DPNs mainly because it's only 16 stitches long. So I didn't want to get out my circulars. I've got really nice circular sets. And these are actually really cheap double pointed needles I got on Amazon, and I'll toss a link in my blog, but I just got a set of all the different sizes. It comes with 5 or 6 double pointed needles per, so that when I do have a project where I need them, which I don't like using them that much, I'm not that great at it, I can just quickly grab the right size all the time. It's super easy. So I'm using 6.5 millimeter. You want it to be a little spacey so that it's stretchy. You don't want it to be really tight, but you don't want it to be too loose either. So find the right needle for you that makes sense for you. I also use a crochet hook in the tutorial. You don't have to, but I use it to seam it up at the end because I prefer using crochet hooks to seam. I use a tapestry needle with this blunt end to make it easy to sew in loose ends. And of course, scissors. Everyone needs to use scissors. And then just a note on the construction itself. If you want to make it smaller for a child, or maybe someone with a smaller head or a bigger head than what it is, you can just change the number of repeats that you do if you want to make it smaller this way, smaller around. And then if you want to make it a little bit thinner instead of so wide, you can take out some of the stitches. So right now it's 4 stitches on each side and 4 in the middle. You can make that 3 very easily. That would make it thinner. You can make it 2, that would make it really thin. And then just keep this sort of mock cables intact. So there's a lot of leeway here. If you want to use a really bulky yarn, you just kind of want to watch. What I do is I take a piece of yarn and I put it around my head, and I measure that, and I want to make sure it's smaller than that when it's knit flat, so that it can stretch onto my head, but not too small. You just play with it and see how it goes. But this is the pattern. I'll be making this throughout this video, so stay tuned. And I hope you love it, and make sure that you tag me in your finished objects so that I can see them for myself and see what your creativity builds. Happy crafting, everyone. Let's go ahead and start our cast on. So when I do a cast on, I leave lots of extra width. There are tricks that you can look up online to see how much working yarn you need to have on your tail in order to have enough stitches. I'm only doing 16 stitches. I know that something like this is going to be more than enough, so I'm just going to stick with that. So I always start with a slip knot, and for a slip knot I go around over the front to back, bring that in front, bring your yarn end in front like this, and then working yarn over, slip the loop over and tighten, and that makes your slip knot. And then the rest of it is going to be casting on 16 stitches as our first step. So for me, I'm just going to use this cast on method. I don't know all the proper names, but you can use any cast on method you want. It doesn't need to be very stretchy, so I'm simply going to do what I would call a standard cast on, and it doesn't have to be too tight, doesn't need to be too loose. When you join it at the end, this is going to become the front middle of your headband. So it's going to be covered by a little piece that you make over it to sort of cinch it in the front middle to give it sort of the effect, the bow tie effect that we have on it. So let me count how many I've done here so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. One more gives me 16. You can see I've got lots of extra on the end there. I don't need that extra. I'm just gonna snip it down to a more reasonable size. And there we've got our 16 cast on. Just pull a little bit. So our first row, you always turn and then you go, because you go from right to left. Make sure when you start with anything, you wanna grab the working yarn. But the first thing we're gonna do is we are going to just knit straight across for the setup row. So that's simply 16 knit stitches across. I'm one of those people, I'm really used to knitting. I can knit across pretty quickly. Purling is something that even after, around 8 years of knitting, I have not gotten accustomed to. So let me just slow this down for people who don't know the knit stitch. You go in front to back, yarn over behind, pull it through and off. Now my knitting style is called continental style. It's just how I hold the yarn is different. So there you go, there's our first setup row. You can see the knit stitches here. Then we're gonna turn it as usual. And so whenever I turn my yarn, I make sure that the working yarn is going under the front of the needle. So you can see now that on this side, they're purl stitches. So our next step is to knit 4, then we're gonna purl 2, knit 4 again, purl 2, knit 4. And that's gonna give us our full 16. So 1, 2, 3, it's 4 knit. Now we're gonna do 2 purl, 1, 2, and then 4 knit, 1, 2, 3, 4 knit, 2 more purl, 1, 2, and then 4 more knit, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And there we go. Then we will turn again. And so what we're doing is we're kind of creating these zones. You're always going to have a knit 4 on each side that's going to be done in garter stitch. So it's knit on wrong side and right side. And then in the middle, we're going to be pulling something up across where we're going to be doing these sort of mock cables stitch that we have here. So again, grab your working yarn, we've turned. So we're now on to our third row. And so this one we're going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we are going to knit 1, and then we're going to make 1 in the middle and then knit 1 again. So we're increasing it by 1. And you can make one however you'd like to do it. I tend to like to grab the bar from underneath that's in between these stitches here, put it up on the needle like this, and then knit into it, and then do a knit. Now we're gonna knit across these 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then again, we've got these 2 stitches here. We're gonna knit one, make one in the middle by lifting the bar, or however you wanna make one. This is the most effective way for me. And then knit one again. And now we're gonna knit all the way across to the end. Because again, on our row structure here, we've got 4 garter stitch, 2 working ones that increases to 3 and then decreases again for a mock cable, 4 in the middle, and then 2 again for the mock cable, and then 4 on the end. A pretty simple sort of setup once you get used to it. Our next row is going to be knitting 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And now, instead of purling 2 like we did the first time we were on the wrong side, we're gonna purl 3 because we had that additional stitch added in the last row. So 1, 2, 3 purls, and then back to our 4 knit stitches in the middle for our middle garter stitch. And then we're going to do 3 purl, 1, 2, 3. So whenever you're doing your purls, you know you're on the wrong side. And then we're gonna do our 4 knit again for our garter edge on this side. Okay, and then I'm gonna flip it over again so you can see. So this is the right side of the work. And you can start to see this ridge forming here and here with our 4 stitch garter stitch panels in between. So these are where our mock cables are gonna be, here and here. And then the next row is where we actually do the cabling part. So we're gonna, again, knit 4 as usual, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here we're gonna slip this first stitch over. We are going to knit the next 2 from our mock cable. Then we're gonna grab the slip stitch, which is the 3rd loop on your needle, on your right needle, and bring it over top the other 2. And that makes your mock cable. We'll see it again in a second here. So 4 more knits to get across. And then here, we're going to slip the first stitch. And I guess I'm slipping knitwise. Then we're going to knit those 2, and then we're gonna pick up the slip stitch and we're gonna bring it over. And then we'll do our knit 4, and we'll take a look at that. All right, and that has formed a mock cable, and we're gonna continue forming these mock cables and repeating those same rows again until we have a total of 18 repeats. So what I've done here so far, this is 1 repeat, and we'll go until we have 18 repeats. So I'll go ahead and work that up, and then we'll come back and we'll see what we do to finish off the body. Okay, we are back, and here we have our 17 repeats of the winter bow tie headband. It's not a full 18. I figured I'd do 1 more full repeat for you to see, but it's a really beautiful texture. So I'm just gonna kind of go in a little closer here so you can see what it's supposed to look like. These are mock cables. They make a really nice ridge if you look at it closely. Again, if you want to make this smaller for your kids or something, you can reduce the number of stitches on the edges or in the middle. So instead of 4, maybe do 3 if you want to make it thinner, and then reduce the number of repeats, and you'll be able to end up with something really nice sized for a child or for someone with a smaller head shape. And again, if you need a larger head shape, then just make it a few more repeats. So I'm just going to sort of break down what we've got here. So each one has the 4 stitches and garter stitch along here, and then one of these mock cable rows, ridges, and then 4 garter again, mock cable, and 4. So you hopefully started to kind of pick up on how the construction works. So I'm gonna do the final, there go. I'm going to do the final pattern repeat just one more time so that you can really get a sense for how it works. Here. So we've made this really, really nice shape. We'll be able to stretch it up. It will go around our head. It doesn't look like that, and that's pretty good that it doesn't look like that, but just to kind of show you where it's gonna go. So once we have finished the body, and here it is, the whole band. You can see the beautiful texture. It's more than long enough if I try it on myself. Goes all the way around, it's stretchy, but obviously we need to add the bow tie component. And we're just gonna cast on 6 stitches total. And again, I'm just using a long tail cast on. It won't matter how stretchy it is. That doesn't matter, that doesn't impact it here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6. And all I'm gonna do is do 10 rows of stockinette. So stockinette, for people who don't know what the term is, it means you knit all the stitches on the right side, and we'll call this first row the right side. So I'm gonna knit along the right side, and then we will purl. Hang on, let me get this last stitch. Last one's always trickier because you don't have something to grab onto. Okay, and then on the wrong side, which is where the purls are, you know that because of these bumps here. So we will now purl along this side using our working yarn. So purl on this side. So this is our second row. Then again, you turn your work again. And then I'm actually going to bind off on row 10 because I'm choosing to, I'm going to stitch this together with a seam probably, rather than trying to 3-needle bind off around the band or anything like that. So everyone will have their own preferred method. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to bind off on that 10th row. I'm going to leave a longer tail this time because I didn't leave a long enough one when I did the first one. And then I'm gonna pull it through. Oh, sorry, I jostled the whole thing. So, I mean, all we've made here is just a little piece. So the bow tie component, I've already shown the construction of the band itself. And then what we're gonna be constructing is first putting the band into a circle. So to do that, we're putting our right sides together. I have several ways listed to do this. So you can either do just a running stitch to seam it up. You can do a crochet stitch, which is what I'm gonna do, probably slip stitch it. because I like the rigidness of that. Or you could do something like a 3-needle bind off or some other way to attach those. To do that, you'd have to pick up your initial cast on stitches as well. So that's a little more invasive. I'm gonna go the crochet route. So I have my crochet hook here. This is a 5mm. Again, it doesn't really matter. You're gonna be creating a seam here. And that seam is gonna get hidden by the band when we put it into the bow tie formation afterwards. So we don't have to be particular about this seam. What we do need to do is make sure that it's a seam that's not gonna break and that it's nice and straight. So here's what I typically do. I hold my right sides together. I've got my long tail over on the right side. And what I simply do is I start by just going under a loop on the side that doesn't have the long tail. And I pull that through just to get the yarn kind of onto the hook. You want one loop to start. Perfect. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to go under a V on each side. There we go. And I'm going to do a slip stitch. So I'm going to pull the yarn through and then pull it through the one that's on the hook. So under the next V, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through. Again, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes when you're seaming, it really matters how tight you seam. This one doesn't matter. You don't want it to be, it doesn't really matter if it's too loose or too tight because it's going to be covered up. And what I tend to do is I always hold the ends together and kind of pinch that in my palm so that as I go along, if it's possible, it won't work if it's really long, but that way as I go along, I know I'm kind of lined up properly. And you do want your stitches to line up as best you can, because that means that on the right side, the mock cable sections will be lining up with each other. And we're just gonna go across. Again, there were 16 stitches on the band, so you should expect about 16 crochet slip stitches here. All right, and then there's one more at the end here. Beautiful. Pull that through. Now I'm going to fasten off just by yarn over and pull it through to pull it right off the hook. So there you can see my seam. Slip stitch is a pretty clean, easy stitch to do it with. It's not too bulky. It does sit up a little bit, but that's no problem because of the nature of what we're about to do next. I'll give a better view here and here. There's our seam. We can flip it inside out so that we have the right side facing again. You can see that everything kind of lines up decently. Very nice. And again, now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this and we're going to be cinching it to create sort of that bow shape. And then we'll be using our little bit here, little band, to go around it. And so let's step through what that will look like. You'll need your tapestry needle for this, which is just a blunt tip needle. So again, it just makes it easy to sew. And with your right side facing, you're gonna want to sort of bunch it up together. I tend to like to try to have the mock cables sort of bumping out towards the front and the rest kind of dipping down and in. And you're gonna bunch it together like this over that seam. Now that seam is on the other side, so it's kind of bunched up under. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be placing the band here with the knit side out. And then this one, it's going to feel a little crazy, but you're just kind of holding all the fabric together here. And then we are going to kind of flip it over so we can see. And then our little band should have a long tail, so find that long tail. And this looks totally chaotic when I'm looking at the video, but it's actually pretty simple. And there's no real magic to this, it's just figure out a way that works for you. But the idea is get the band around, and then I'm going to attach the band with the long tail. I'm going to attach it to itself. And this way we can play with the position of the band, the bow tie band afterwards without being committed to it. So my long tail is here, And here's the other side. So I'm gonna attach this side of the band to this side, just with a running stitch. So I'm gonna go up one side. There's gonna be a lot of loose threads kind of hanging around. I'm just choosing to ignore them. Again, the band is just being sewn to itself for now. It's the easiest thing to do, and then you play with the positioning afterwards. Get to something you're happy with. I might do one extra, even though I'm at the end here, just to kind of put it in place. Okay, so that band is together. Nothing fancy, because again, this is going to go on the back as well. I'm actually going to knot it off just in case I decide to get rid of this end. But yeah, now you can turn it around to the front right side. It should look something like this, which is great because when you put it on your head, it's gonna fan out like this into a bow. What you wanna make sure is that the way you have it placed is that the front stockinette is there, the seam from the stockinette band is in the back, and also where it's placed sort of horizontally covers up the actual seam that's inside. Once you're happy with the placement, I think it's absolutely fine where it is. Go to the back again, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab onto a single stitch on this end that's on the band itself, near the base of the band, just to hold that in place. And then I'm actually gonna just put the yarn all the way under. This is a really easy thing to do because this band will never come back out. And I'm gonna attach it to one stitch over here just to secure the location of that stockinette band compared to the overall band, so it doesn't slide and expose the seam. And with that, it shouldn't move, it's in place, it's ready to go. Now I'm just gonna hide this. How should I hide it? I'm just gonna kind of go up and down along this seam. This is in the back, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm gonna pull it all the way kind of under here. The nice thing about this under area is you can hide all your stitches in here because it's never gonna be exposed. This is sort of the front back. And all this one, I've got this really small guy here. You can just kind of tuck it in, come up and back down if you want to. Then remember my trick where I pull it a little bit too tight and then snip and it will disappear in there. Let's see what other yarn ends I have, and then we'll take a look at what we've got. All right, so I'm just gonna kind of loop this around a couple times and then go in through here. Beautiful. And cut it. And this long one, which is probably from my original cast on. Again, a lot of people really get worried about how to finish it, because the difference between a quality looking knit or crochet pattern and a little more, handmade is often in the finishing technique. So play with it and don't be afraid to redo stuff. A lot of people think that it's kind of one and done, but there's very little things in knitting and crocheting that are one and done and you can't ever fix. All right, I think those are all my ends. They are. So let's take a look overall at what we've got. Here it is. Okay, so you can see sort of the bow tie. We'll do a little view here of what the front would look like. If you find that it's curling a little too much in the middle part here, what you can do is actually block it into shape. But I think a couple wears on the head and that will be good to go, especially if you're using an acrylic yarn. Wool, you'll probably want to block for sure. And for people who don't know about blocking, go and look up knit blocking and see what it's all about. It's basically about setting your fiber in place in the right shape. So there's our bow tie headband. I'll let that zoom in for a second. There it is. With our ridges, and our back is flat like this. It's beautiful. I'm gonna try putting it on my head, although my hair isn't really perfect for this kind of stuff, but what I love about headbands is in the winter, I don't like hats because they get just too hot on my head. So these are perfect to keep my ears warm. It doesn't mess with your hair too much. And yeah, look at that. I'm really happy with how this one has turned out. I'll snap a few pictures of it. But yeah, make sure that you follow along with me on social media at Yarnworx Studio. That's Yarnworx with an X, as well as yarnworxstudio.com, which is my website. And find me on YouTube where you're hopefully watching this. I've got lots of free patterns and lots of stuff coming up. So this is my winter bow tie headband. And I would love it if you would tag me on your makes and use hashtag winter bow tie headband to let me see your finished objects, okay? Thank you, everybody. Happy crafting.